Please tell me you did not say that to a client.
Hey everybody, before we start this episode, a quick shout out to our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by the Perfect RIA. How could it not be brought to you by the Perfect RIA? But if you enjoy these episodes, if you think that Micah and I, or at least Micah, have some great advice to give, head over to our website, theperfectria.com, and download one of our free guides towards making your practice better. So it's not just the things you hear on the podcast, it's the things that you implement. And if you're saying, you know what I'd really like to get in a room with Matt and Micah. I'd really like to ask them my own questions. I'd like to be coached by them. Then send an email to lifestyle@theperfectria.com, and one of our great team members will reach out to you and tell you more about the program. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Perfect RIA podcast. I'm your co-host, Matthew Jarvis, and with me, as usual, the man, the myth, the legend, Micah Shalansky, live from Anchorage, Wasilla, Alaska. Micah, how are you, my friend?
Oh, just doing a fantastic, Jarvis. Another day in paradise. We're going to start getting daylight here in a few days, which will be fantastic, actually. So winter solstice is coming up, then we actually start getting daylight. So we're down to just a few hours. So it's a lot of nighttime activities, but yeah, that's been pretty fun. Staying busy up here. What about you?
Is the differential between day and night, the light and the darkness, like nighttime activities start at 3 in the afternoon? It's like afternoon tea is like night tea, or?
Yeah, pretty much. Well, 3 in the afternoon, that's generous. I do appreciate that. But yeah, so, well, it's a little bit different though. It really depends every year on the season. So the myth is, and this is what a lot of lower 40ers think, when the sun goes down, it's dark. Well, that depends on where you live. And Jarvis, you know this because you played in the snow before.
Yeah.
Snow's reflective, right? And so if we have a good snow year and we have some fresh snow coming down and it's a full moon out and you get a full moon and stars out, it can light up where we can be winter camping and you don't even need a flashlight in the evening. So it will get darker, but it doesn't get like pitch black all the time. So, but still fun joys of living in Alaska.
Yeah, for sure. Which obviously the flip side is the summer, which is also incredible as well. So,
amen.
But whether it's light out or dark out, whether you're in Alaska, which is north, not next to Hawaii, or in the main 40, wherever you may find yourself, or we have an ever-growing international audience. Of course, we have a lot of advisors listening from Europe, from South Africa, from Australia, and shout out to all of our Canada, of course, all of our advisor friends, wherever you're at, right? And whatever accent you may have or language you're speaking, whatever the case may be, there are things that should be spoken to clients and things that should never be spoken. Now, I'm not talking about the swear words that your mother told you not to repeat. That's sort of a given. But there are a lot of things we hear advisors telling clients, or even, heaven forbid, team members telling clients that just should never be spoken in your office. And again, we're not talking about the vulgar. That's its own thing. We're talking about ways that your language is either delivering massive value or it's damaging the relationship.
Well, Jarvis, I would jump in there kind of the higher level and say, hey, first question to ask is, do you think your language matters? Do you think your word choice matters, right? Well, if it doesn't matter, then just say whatever the hell you want to say.
Sure.
It is not going to have any effect. Okay, assuming you're not in that camp, you know some language matters. Okay, now where's the line, right? We're kind of to the line that everything counts. Everything helps or everything hurts, right? Which side of the line is it going to be on? And language is such an important thing because it empowers our clients to fulfill their goals. And that's really what I think about this, right? You and I as financial planners really don't have different tools. Well, we do, but that's different. But most don't have different tools, right? And softwares you use, et cetera, that's out there. But really it comes down to how effective are we in our communication to let the client know where they're at, what they need to change in order for them to achieve their goals. So words matter. Language matters. How we communicate with clients matters to get them to take action, which is the whole reason they're hiring us.
Yeah, and it's easy to be dismissive of this. In fact, typically our friends that have more letters after their name than they have assets under management are often very dismissive. Like the academic crowd is very dismissive of this, right? They're saying, no, I just need to tell them what their Monte Carlo analysis is. But all of the studies that we've seen in social science, whether it's in the street stuff, when we're talking about to Chris Voss, right? Never Split the Difference, the FBI hostage negotiator. When we're looking at the book Persuasion by Robert Cialdini, all of these things say that the words that you use make an incredible amount of difference. There's this old saying, right? Your words will make you rich. And so how you frame things to clients can make all the difference. Micah, we've talked about this in relation to a client come in and they say, Jarvis, great news. I want to take out a lot of money from my portfolio. And maybe when that client comes in, they're already like dangerously close on their guardrails, right? So the initial reaction will be like, you can't afford to take any money. But the better reaction here is, oh, wow, this sounds really exciting. Like, tell me more. Tell me what you're going to be doing. And sometimes they come back, Micah, and a lot of money is like $1,000. Like, all right, no problem.
Right.
Sometimes it's a bigger problem. Sometimes they say, I'm going to take out $2 million because I'm going to buy 40 timeshares in wherever, and they're going to make so much money, I'll be able to retire tomorrow. Interesting. Tell me a little bit more about this. Yeah. So it can really go on the spectrum.
You know, it really can. And this is one of the things that you have to be curious in client meetings. And it comes, at least from our level, at a very genuine curiosity level, right? When a client is excited about something, I'm excited about helping them achieve that, right? My job, and this is what I tell clients all the time, I'm going to push back on advisors a little bit. It is not our job to say the client has to follow our ideas. What is our job is to say, hey, the client wants to get here. How do we help them get there, right? Our ideas, their ideas, somebody else's ideas, I really don't care. My job is to say, does this point you in the direction of achieving your goals or not? That's my job. Now, what I like about that job, right, is I get to take anybody's ideas, any situation, whether it's I'm going to buy timeshares, I'm going to buy real estate, I want to buy gold, we're going to invest in the market, I want to do tax planning, I don't want to do tax planning. Great. Yeah. My only tool that I'm going to look at is saying, does this help the client get closer to their goals or not? If it does, it's a good idea. If it doesn't, it's a bad idea. That's it. And now all of a sudden it take the bias out of this, Jarvis, because for so long, I was feeling like, hey, if the client doesn't follow my recommendations, right? If they didn't follow what I recommend, then they don't believe in me, then they get offended, then I get offended by them not following it. Like the example of the CPA you were sharing a little bit earlier before our call, right? We get offended by these things, which we shouldn't be. Our job is to communicate things. Our job is to effectively communicate so the client takes action closer to their goals.
Yeah, it really is, Mike. And so much, especially in, I feel like this always makes me sound old, but in today's world, right, there's so few cases or places where we can actually be listened to, right? Let's use the medical profession as this glaring example, right? Like a doctor, a nurse, they have really no time to listen to whatever it is, even your tax preparer, your attorney, whatever the case may be. So being one of the few people that says, Micah, that's really interesting. Tell me a little bit more about that. Or that really sounds like a lot of fun. Or even if it's something negative, boy, that really sounds like a struggle. I bet that's really weighing on you. Tell me a little bit more about that, right? And as you pointed out, Micah, these are really sincere. This isn't like a throwaway line. Like I'm not a chat GPT teleprompter, right? Like, oh, tell me more about your problem, right? I am genuinely curious because, as you point out, Micah, in my heart of hearts, I want the client to have the best financial life, the best life they can possibly have. And the way they're going to have the best life is if I have the best understanding of where they're coming from. And if they realize that I understand their life better than anyone else in the world, probably better than them, that's where we're going to make the most progress together. And this, by the way, is why some advisors can charge a premium fee for delivering premium value, because they understand this and they're very good at it. And others can't understand that even for $100, they can't get a client in the world.
All right, so let's talk about why we're doing this podcast, right? This may have come from a real life example recently. Oh, but Jarvis, before that though, you kind of make that doctor example. And so doctors like 15-minute slots. So we moved to a concierge doctor a while ago because same thing. My wife wanted a little bit more time with the doctor. Now we have like an hour to an hour and a half appointments. And I'm like, oh, for the love of Pete, wrap it up. This cannot take that long. So apparently I'm not happy in either scenario. But
well, it's a happy medium, right? Everything has a balance, right?
Everything has a balance, right? All right, so we had a client. After surge, they called in the office, something happened. They said, hey, Micah, you need to call the client back. She's a little confused on her Roth conversion and things. So not a problem. We have a system for that. It was put in the FYI. A meeting was scheduled, which is fantastic. I get on the phone with a client. She's down south helping her kids move. And we just start chit-chatting about things that are going on, having a good call. I'm like, hey, you had some questions on Roth conversion. Now, Jarvis, we talked about the Roth conversion 2 weeks ago in our client meeting. We've done Roth conversions for the last 4 years. We have 80% of her assets are now converted to Roth IRAs. So this isn't a new thing for a client, right? This isn't like a brand new idea for her. We're only going to do 1 or 2 more Roth conversions. She's kind of done because we don't need to convert all of her assets. So it's kind of odd that she has a question on Roth conversions, but no worries. Like I'm genuinely curious, right? So we have a good chit chat and I start, talking to her. I said, hey, I got a note from the team that you had some questions on the Roth conversions. I want to make sure that we answer that. But before we get to that, what other big questions or concerns you have that you want to make sure we're talking about, right? And I want to open that door for that communication. So she comes in and she lets me know, Jarvis. She's like, well, I was talking to your team and they called me and they talked about the dollar amount of the Roth conversion. And okay, that made sense. They talked about forms that need to get signed. That made sense. But then your office asked me, how do you want to pay for the taxes on this Roth conversion? And in the back of my mind, I'm like, our team did not just say that, did they? And I'm like, I'm sorry, client, would you explain that to me just one more time? What did our team say? And she says, well, your team member asked me how I wanted to pay the taxes on the Roth conversion. And Mike, I got a little confused and a little frustrated at the time because I'm pretty sure that's your job to figure out. And I'm like, yes, that's 100% my job to figure out. I really appreciate you. Clearly, we had a miscommunication, right? And then I kind of backtrack a little bit, Jarvis, and start at the top level of what is a Roth conversion? Why are we doing this? How the taxes make the most sense to get paid and where we're paying the taxes from. So our team got into routine mode, right? Which was saying, hey, every single time that we talk about this, they've done it 50 times a day. This client's done it for the last 8 years. This is an old hat kind of thing. And they got into such a routine mode, they forgot to deliver value when talking to the clients about little things. They forgot to look at the notes. They forgot to look into the details of it. And they kind of set up a little problem for our client. Now, it wasn't a complaint, wasn't a big issue. The client was just like, nope, I don't want to talk to the team anymore. Let me talk to Micah and let's figure out the tax issue. But this goes to the importance of we can't slip into a routine in conversation. We got to make sure we're being really intentional about it.
Yeah, that's a good example because it would be easy to dismiss that as not a big thing. And what I really want to draw from this, and Mike, I got to confess to our listeners, this is where I almost feel this podcast has done a disservice to the industry is often we make it seem too easy, right? The easy thing here to do is just ask the client, what would you like for tax withholding? That's the easy thing. It takes real work. Doesn't seem like it, but it takes real work to say, all right, I'm going to come to this meeting knowing how they're going to pay the taxes, knowing how much, because I looked at their tax return, I've looked at their prior notes, I've looked at their situation, I know their other assets. Here's what we're going to do. Mr. and Mrs. Client, we're going to do this $50,000 Roth conversion. We are going to have to pay the IRS about $10,000 in taxes. Great news. Mike, as you always say, whatever pot of money creates the taxes, pays the taxes. So we're going to use this money from your investment account, et cetera, et cetera. That's work. That's work, especially across an entire client base. It's got to be noted in the CRM. Someone's going to have to look at the tax return. You're going to have to get the tax return. You're going to have to say, is anything different this year than last year, right? There are 100 things that have to go in place. That might not even be an overstatement. There are 100 things that have to go in place for you to be able to call a client, or your team to call a client and say, this is how much we're converting. This is the tax bill. This is how we're paying it. What questions or concerns do you have? That is real work. And again, it's why some advisors can deliver massive value and charge a premium fee, and why others can't figure out how to get their first client. Like, this is hard to do, guys and girls. It's hard work.
It really is, right? And it's not just that. We can't let our team, and this is something that I failed in, right? This is kind of the leadership. I got used to my team just taking care of a lot of these things and following the notes, et cetera. And I wasn't following up with them on their client communication. So it's one of the things that we did afterwards is we kind of pulled the team together. The operations team says, okay, this is what happened. Number one, is this what you said or not? Now, kudos to my team. The lady in question, she pulled up her notes and she's like, yep, that's exactly what I said. And I was like, okay, well, great. You owned it, right?
Thank you for
see
owning
the rest
it.
of the team just, put their hand on their head and be like, holy crap, I can't believe you said this. But it's like, all right, we all make mistakes. You owned it. Now we can fix it, right? And that's a big thing in our office is kind of owning those. But now we're doing a little more role-playing, Jarvis. Now we're doing a little bit more communication. But one thing that I failed to do, I wasn't telling the team exactly how I communicate this with clients. I've done it in the past, but I didn't do it in the surge cycle. So one of the things going on to our end of surge debrief and our pre-surge for next time, if I'm starting to communicate big strategies to clients and the ops team, the RMs, whoever are going to implement those, I need to multiple times communicate with them how I'm explaining it to clients to make sure we're using that same language.
Yeah, you do. And it really ties back to this, especially with team members, but even for ourselves, right? This old saying of you get what you inspect, not what you expect. In fact, actually, Mike, we were talking about this as a family the other day. For whatever reason, we were talking about fast food, which is a rare thing in our world. But the kids were saying, how come all of the people at Chick-fil-A are so friendly, right? They're like notably friendly. And so we were saying, like, well, why are the people at Chick-fil-A so friendly and the people at McDonald's seem like, you could die or not die. They're not really going to care right there.
Right.
Why is that? We said, well, it's the same minimum wage people, right? Like, they're not paying people twice as much at Chick-fil-A. It's the same demographics. So we said, well, it's this culture, right? That's part of their culture. And they're constantly reinforcing that to the point where if a manager hears an employee say, when someone says, thank you, if they don't say, that's my pleasure, there's going to be a discussion on that, right? And that applies to us with Roth conversions or anything else. But an example would be a client calls in, hey, listen, I need to talk to Jarvis. Oh, great news, Mr. and Mrs. Client. Matthew is always excited to hear from you. He's helping another client or he's not available right now. Is there something I can help you with? No, actually, there's not. I really need to talk to Matthew. Perfect. If this is urgent, I can get him on the phone today. Otherwise, can he call you tomorrow at 2 p.m.? Tomorrow at 2 p.m. would be great. Great. Can I tell him what it's regarding so that he can be prepared for the call? Well, I just want to change the tax withholding on my distribution. Great news. I can take care of that, right? Versus in a default advisor's office, hey, I need to talk to Jarvis. Let me see if he's available, which is code for, let me see if you're important enough for him to take your call, right? So there's this just huge contrast in communication styles that can go on.
Yeah, it's super important, right? To have this communication, to have this culture, to have this inspection aspect of it. And the words matter, right? And the same thing like when we do all of our client openings, we've talked about this so often, right? Asking those open-ended questions to make sure that we're soliciting what those questions and concerns are right from the beginning. Those things matter. How we respond to that matters. So Jarvis, I'd actually like to take a little bit of time. Let's actually run through kind of some things not to say to clients. And I did this with our team. My thought process and how I go through answering client questions, because I almost never want to lead with an answer. When a client comes in and even says, Micah, how much is my RMD going to be this next year? As simple as that question is, right? And I got the answer right in front of me, and I could lead with $58,327. I could do that, but I have an opportunity here to ask a little more questions because I could be answering the wrong question. Because how many times do you have a client come in that you thought asked a super clear and concise question, you gave them the answer, they looked all kinds of confused because they were thinking about something else. When I asked for the RMD, I was actually thinking about my QCD amount, and I only do $10,000. Why would you say $58,000, right? So we always got to have an opportunity to ask more questions. But before we get to that, we want to do a quick word from our sponsors and really say thank you to them for the support and effort they give us to make sure that we can produce this podcast for you guys.
Hey everybody, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Belay. You know, the best part of having a virtual assistant from Belay is not the things that they get done that you were already going to do. That is valuable, by the way. It's that list of things that if we're being honest, you need to get to and you're just never going to get it done. Like that doctor's appointment you keep meaning to schedule, or the contractor you need to find for your house to fix that leaky thing, or the flowers you keep meaning to send to your wife. Those are all things that you can give your Belay virtual assistant so that they get done, because we know that, if we're being honest, they're probably not going to get done. Now, how are they going to get done? Because Belay finds virtual assistants, including my own virtual assistant, who are masters at working down task lists. They're masters at taking one step ahead of what you're already thinking, right? Reach out to Belay, text the letters RIA to 55123 to get a free copy of their ebook. More importantly, to get introduced to my good friend Teresa, who's going to see if you're a good fit for a virtual assistant. Not everyone is. And then find a virtual assistant who's perfectly matched to your needs. So text the letters RIA to 55123. And now back to the episode. Well, thanks again to our sponsors. Really appreciate you supporting the show, making it available to not just Micah, you and I, but to our entire team and to the entire nation. So before we went to the sponsors, Micah, you talked about that we want to be careful to not just blurt out the answer, right? Your RMD is $58,000. We always need to probe, like, hey, can I afford to take $50,000? Yes, no, whatever. It's easy to jump into that. We need to probe a little bit more. I think, Micah, for two reasons. One, I really want to understand where the client's coming from. I also want to buy just a little bit of time to get my wheels turning in that direction.
I love it, right? So what are some things that are kind of some default answers that sometimes we'll jump right to that you should normally avoid? Number one, that's a bad idea. It's a bad idea to say that's a bad idea. So you work with whatever context that you want on that one, right?
That's right.
Just leading with those types of things generally is pretty negative. We can't do that. Generally not the case, right? You need to do that.
Yes.
These types of things, when we start limiting clients in this way, before we've really asked a ton of questions to understand more, really put a negative feeling in that meeting. Keep in mind, this is the client's money. They can do whatever the hell they want with the money. It's their money. It's our job to help guide them to their goals. And in order to do that, we got to ask better questions. So Jarvis, I'm going to kick it over to you and say a client walks in and says, you know what, Jarvis, I want to pull out $700,000 or, let's do this, 70% of my portfolio. And I want to go ahead and invest in real estate because I think the market's going to collapse.
Yeah. So first thing that's going to go through my mind, Micah,
is that's a bad idea.
Oh, wait, that's a bad idea. That may be going through my mind. I want to have some empathy for how difficult it was for the client to ask that question, right? Whether it's the RMD question or whatever question is, right? Most of the time, and if you're really in tune to this thing, people, they're worried that they're going to ask the wrong question, they're going to be dumb, that they're going to ruin anything. So I'm really going to, I'm physically going to lean into this, but I'm also going to emotionally lean into this. Like, that sounds really interesting. Tell me a little bit more, right? I can always buy so much time with that's really interesting. Tell me a little bit more. No matter what it is. I want to write my kids out of the will. Wow, that's really interesting. Tell me a little bit more. Even now, especially Mike, if it's a question where I don't know the answer to. If they're like, hey, you remember 7 years ago we met and we talked about this thing? Yeah, tell me a little bit more about that, right? Like, I want to let them do some of the work here for me, right? But I'm also, as you point out, I'm genuinely curious. Whether it's I want to buy $700,000 so I can double short cryptocurrency or whatever it is, that's really like I am sincerely interested. Tell me a little bit more about that. I'd be happy to discuss that, right? And I'm matching their body language and whatever papers I had, I'm sliding to the side and I've got my pen and I'm ready to take notes, right? I'm doing everything I can to make this as an inviting as an environment as I possibly can.
Jarvis, one of the things that I love about that, and you're going to hear this in the language that I sample use for some things in a little bit, is I want to make sure that everyone in the room is on the same page, including the spouses. Right?
Yes.
How many times have you walked in and a spouse comes up with one question and the other spouse has no idea what the hell they're talking about, right? Okay, well, you and the client are on the same page, but then the spouse you're not on the same page with, right? And it says, okay, now we have an emotional disconnect and potentially a marriage fight we're going to have to referee in a second. So one of the things I love to do, asking questions and having empathy, just like you said, is it allows more things to come out so we can make sure we're on the same page and talking about the same thing.
I know we're jumping around with our examples here, but the RMD example that you gave earlier, right? I'm always going to take a step back and provide some context. So, hey, what's my RMD for the rest of this year? Well, that's a really great question. We actually, one of the great things we do as your advisor is track that for you. As you may remember, I would say, as you may remember, each year, the IRS wants us to take a certain amount out of your account because they want to get paid. Ha, ha, ha. All right, so we're going to take the year-end balance. We're going to divide it by your life expectancy. I'm not sure how the IRS knows your life expectancy. I don't know if they've been to your house. They've looked at your diet and exercise. Obviously, they haven't. It's a generic one. And we kind of walk through that. Now, I also want to not belabor that point too much. I don't want to start reading the tax code. If it takes me 27 minutes to get to the answer of 53,000, that's a problem. But if I just blurt out 53,000, I'm probably going to miss the issue as well. I'm not going to be able to draw on the spouse who wasn't asking the question. So I'm balancing. Let's get some context here. Let's take a little bit of a step back. But I'm also never dodging the question either.
Yes.
Right? I'm going to get to the answer and I'm going to do it as quickly as I can, but I am going to provide context always.
So, Jarvis, one of the things that I love to throw out there, and very similar language, a little different than yours, I like to say, forgive me, I know you already know this, but I want to make sure we're on the same page.
It's a great one.
Right?
It's a great one.
And that gives me some grace with the clients to allow me to explain a little bit more and to make sure that we're on the same page. No one ever pushes back on this and says, Mike, I don't want to make sure we're on the same page. So then we can talk about the RMDs and walk them through. And that brings up to the other point. I love what, Jarvis, you did right there. And we talked to our team about. You start at the 30,000 foot view and you work your way down to the answer, right? And again, you don't have to take 27 minutes to do it. You can take some big jumps in here, but let's make sure we're on that. Hey, the IRS looks at this every single year. This is really important. It's something that comes up all the time. They use your life expectancy divided by your account balance. Okay, now how is this number being created? Now we have a little bit of the why it's going to be there. This is how much you got to take out this year. Great news. We're going to recalculate it next year for you as well, right? And you got to pay taxes on the money. So many things were explained in that 30 seconds you took to get to the answer that really helps to make sure that we're on the same page. And the problem that comes is when we don't take that 30 seconds, we jump to the answer, it works. And then it works again, and then it works again, and then it blows up in your face. And now you're going to spend 15 minutes backtracking with a client going back through because you were not on the same page. And so this is the trap we fall into, is we shortchange it with one client and it goes through just fine, and we don't think it matters, but it does.
It so does. In fact, as you were describing that, I was also thinking that one of the things I try to keep in mind whenever a client asks the question is, this is an awesome opportunity for me to strengthen this relationship, right?
Yeah.
Asking a question is always it's a vulnerable spot, right? So a client says, hey, I have this question, right? Maybe I should know this myself. And I'm saying, boy, this is an opportunity for us to strengthen this relationship. Now, and Micah, you know, I've done several episodes on this. I'm also just infinitely aware of their body language. So if I'm taking a step back to do context and I notice that their body language starts shutting down, it tells me I've gone into too much detail or I'm in the wrong direction or I need to speed this thing up, right? Or conversely, if I get kind of a scowl, like a confused look, I need to slow down. That's where I need to get my pen out. I need to draw some. This is where I need to put a joke or two in there. Like, hey, next time President Biden calls me, I'll let him know that having the steepest penalty in the tax code be given to retirees who don't take out enough money, that seems odd to me. But until he calls, we're going to just deal with these rules. Ha, 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 right? And I tell that same joke again and again. So you've got to be, this communication is so much more than just the words that you're speaking.
Now, again, with knowing clients, this is a lot more on the advanced level, so you got to be careful with it, is I have some clients that are extremely high Ds, very dominant individuals, and then their spouse is very high Is. They want more conversation. They want more social stuff as well. And so I split my answers, right? If he comes in and asks a question as the high D, what's my RMD? I'm probably going to get to the answer really quickly. Then I'm going to backtrack in my communication with the spouse and make sure we're on the same page. It'll probably be something like, it's probably about, Bob, about $58,000. You know what? Forgive me. I kind of jumped into the details. Let's step back. I know you guys already know this. The RMDs are calculated every year. And then all of a sudden I sit back as I switch over and look at the wife and kind of explain how the entire process works. Now, does this mean she is not smart? No, that's not an intelligence question whatsoever. It's a communication style question. But if I go to Bob, and I know the client, I'm just picturing my mind right now. If I go to him with that long answer, like he's going to start leaning in, like, give me the damn answer. Right? Yeah. I didn't ask for a dissertation. But if I give it there and I switch over to his wife and I do the more explanation, both clients are now happy. And so you got to really understand that communication dynamics.
Yeah, you really do. And of course, as you're listening to this episode, and we got to cut to action items here and a final word from our sponsors, this is a really deep topic, right? And it's something that is a constant work of progress. It is not, you're never going to arrive at good communication. It's something you're going to have to work on again and again. So Mike, I think on that note, let's go to action items. Action item number 1 for me would be pick 1 or 2 of your most common communication points. We gave the example of RMDs. We gave the example of distributions, Roth conversions, calling in for a meeting, whatever that's. Look at that, really analyze what exactly is being said here and how could that message be improved, right? And I always look at those from the lens of, if my entire client relationship, if every fee they were ever going to pay me in their lifetime was contingent on this discussion, how would I do that discussion?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I'm going to add another action item on there. Anytime that you're having communication with clients, you need to be clear with what their action items are and your action items are. Yes. Let's take a simple Roth conversion. Great news, Mr. and Mrs. Client. We're going to do a $50,000 Roth conversion. You go through all the explanation. Great news. There's no homework assignments on your end. Our team is going to be able to handle 100% of that. That means we're going to do the conversion as well as have taxes withheld or wherever that statement's going to be. But I want to be really clear in their homework, even if it's 0, and my homework in the items that we're going to be doing.
Yeah, I would say a next action item, it can be really difficult to figure out these communication things because you don't have enough opportunities for trial and error, right? If you're seeing 20 clients a day, every day of the week, your whole year, I guess you could do trial and error. I would rather not trial and error on clients because the client that I error on is kind of a big problem, right? So This is where I'm always going to surround myself by not just financial advisors, but by top level communicators. I'm going to watch super closely. I'm just going to flat out ask them, Micah, you and I have had this discussion a lot of times. When you're doing a fee increase, tell me word for word, what are you saying? When you're presenting your fee to a prospect, word for word, what are you saying? Now, are Micah's words going to work perfectly for me? No, they're not. He has different delivery, different mannerisms, but that's going to give me a good framework to go from. So I'm always going to look and say, who is the master of this communication? Even things like how places ask for a tip or how do they describe the dollar amount? I mean, all of these things, who's really good at this? And I'm going to try to emulate that as much as I can.
Asking for a tip. It's like when you're checking out now and they spin the iPad around to you. It says there's a form you have to complete. Really? What form? What form do I have to complete? Oh, how much tip you want? That's what you're asking for?
Fee compression,
you're just saying
Micah.
It's a form?
Fee compression. It's a real thing.
Fee compression is a real thing. That's what inflation says all the time. All right, last action item for you guys, 5 stars. Make sure you're giving us 5 stars. Share the love, share the podcast. Reason we do this is to air kind of things are happening in our practices so everyone's practice can improve. So get out there, get more information. If you're not a member, man, sign up by now. Yeah. It's time to make 2024 the best year ever. And Jarvis, until next time, Merry Christmas and happy planning.
Merry Christmas, Micah. Happy planning. Hey, before you leave, a quick word from our sponsors. Hey, everybody. I want you to take a quick look around your office, and on your desk, there should be the Retirement Tax Services Desktop Tax Guide. And if it's not there, or if it's not current, meaning you didn't download it in the last month, go to retirementtaxservices.com and download the Desktop Tax Guide. This is a must-have resource for every financial advisor committed to tax planning.
Information designed to change lives. Financial planning can make you thrive. Start today, don't think twice.